Our planet is in trouble. Two major issues that are affecting our ecosystems and our species' public health is global warming and ozone depletion. Although ozone depletion is often misconstrued as the main reason for global warming, this is not the case. Global warming and ozone depletion are two separate problems. Global warming is primarily caused by putting too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which then spreads around the planet like a blanket. While ozone depletion is the thinning of the layer in our stratosphere that protects us from the sun's harmful UVB rays. The ozone layer, which is located in the stratosphere, is composed of O3 gas and protects us from 98% of the sun's harmful rays. Our ozone is thinning in patches, primarily around the poles, due to chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, that are emitted into the atmosphere. Chlorine, fluorine, and carbon are all emitted naturally into the atmosphere by things such as volcanoes, but the Earth has its own absorption and diminishing mechanisms to filter out these naturally made chemicals. There is skepticism of how the emissions of chlorofluorocarbons are affecting our ozone layer due to the fact that they do occur naturally. But scientists have noticed a direct correlation in the depletion of the ozone layer since 1985, at the time when petroleum became a part of politics, society, and technology. 90% of chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, are admitted into the atmosphere by developed countries in the northern hemisphere, mainly due to the use of aerosol, refrigerants, and plastic products. The reason that these chemicals are wearing down the ozone layer is because the chlorine, fluorine, and carbon particles connect to the O3, causing a chemical reaction that breaks down the O3. Our species' poor habits, including consumption and the improper disposal of products, is the main cause of ozone depletion. The wide use of automobiles in our society is the main culprit of carbon gas emissions in the chlorofluorocarbon chain. There are 1.2 billion vehicles on the road in the world today, but in the United States alone, an average of 20 pounds of CO2 is emitted per gallon of gas used, and one person averages 500 gallons of gas a year. That's a lot of emissions. Another large culprit in the wearing away of the ozone layer is the petroleum industry. Petroleum is what we use to make gasoline, but it also creates plastic products. Americans generate 10.5 million tons of plastic waste a year. 14 billion pounds of plastics are dumped into the ocean every year, affecting habitats, marine life, and in turn, the food chain in itself, let alone the fact that for every 1 pound of that plastic produced, creates 3 pounds of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. Depletion of the ozone layer affects all life on Earth, but the main thing that it affects is marine life and ecosystems. The main aspect of marine life that is affected by ozone depletion is an organism at the very bottom of the food chain, phytoplankton. Phytoplankton may be at the bottom of the food chain, but they're also where the food chain starts. Phytoplankton are affected the most by ozone depletion because their productivity is limited to the upper layer of the ocean, the euphotic zone. These little guys like to hang out at the upper layer of the ocean because that's where they get their food. That's right, they're photosynthesizers. They get their energy straight from the sun. Unfortunately, the place that they get their food is also the place that is causing their destruction. The depletion of the ozone layer is causing them to be exposed to solar UVB radiation. Radiation has been shown to affect both orientation and motility in phytoplankton. This results in the reduction of their survival rates, along with reproduction. The survival and reproduction of phytoplankton matter so much because bigger plankton feed on them. Bigger plankton, such as zooplankton, are vital for the survival of species as big as the humpback whale, as small as herring, or shrimp. The fish that feed on zooplankton are the main diet for most species in the ocean. Marine life that rely on fish, such as herring, as a large part of their diet are mammals such as dolphins, porpoises, toothed whales, seals, sea lions. But then comes the land animal factor that also rely on fish as their main diet. Many birds, such as cranes, seagulls, and herrings, rely on fish as a dominant part of their diet. But there's also another factor: bigger creatures like grizzly bears. Not only animals, but also our own species, our own population. We rely on fish, land animals, pretty much anything that lives, to feed us. Yet all of this disruption comes down to us, depleting something that protects our planet and protects the start of the food chain, the thing that feeds what we need to live. Depletion of the ozone layer isn't only affecting the animal aspect of the food chain, but also plants. The excess of UVB radiation caused from the depletion of the ozone layer directly affects the development of plants. It affects their DNA, how they grow, and how they will continue to thrive for the rest of their life. Poor development of plants from the beginning affects distribution of nutrients to plants and the ability for them to fight disease and reproduce more plants. Depletion of the ozone layer won't only affect marine life, but also all herbivores or omnivores that rely on crops, plants, and everything green for part or all of their main diet will start to diminish as well, affecting all of the carnivores of our precious food chain. If our population doesn't make change rapidly and soon, eventually the entire food chain will crumble, and so will we, the species at the very top of the food chain. The good news is, there's a solution to food depletion. The Environmental Protection Agency takes care of most of the solutionary programs needed to protect our ozone and replenish it. They create regulations to reduce emissions and to reduce the depletion of the ozone, but this can only do so much. Unfortunately, the greater good of the economy will always outweigh the greater good of the environment. So that's where we come in, the little guys. There's small things we can do to make great change. Cutting out aerosol cans from your life will reduce hydrocarbons from the atmosphere. Appliances such as refrigerators, freezers, and air conditioners contain chlorofluorocarbons to insulate them. So if you happen to have a really old refrigerator, say from before 1995, you should probably properly dispose of them to reduce leakage of chlorofluorocarbons into the atmosphere. Something else you can do to help the ozone layer is to reduce your consumption. CO2 comes from a lot of things like driving your car or how much plastic you're using. Get reusable items. Drive your car a little less. Take public transportation. Do small things to make big change and reduce carbon dioxide emissions. These are a few small things we can do to make great change. But what would make the greatest change is if governments took responsibility for the destruction of our planet and banned harmful chemicals that deplete the ozone layer and create havoc on our food chain that will eventually lead to large food depletions for our population and many species across the world. We live in a day and age where technology is constantly evolving. We need to stop putting our efforts towards convenience and start putting it towards the safety of our planet and our public health. If proper measures are taken and continue to be taken, the ozone will be replenished by 2050. This is the solution to ozone depletion and food scarcity.